Hey, this is Paul Weber, and you're listening to The Northern Report.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Northern Report podcast. I am your host, Sean Burns, coming right at you today from a hotel room in Libertyville, Illinois. I'm on the road for almost all of November across the United States on the stand-up and sideways bases with Core Blund and the Hurtin' Albertans. Nice to get back to work here with the fellas. And Branson Anderson is in from Utah to open this tour for us. And folks, let me tell you, he is knocking it out of the park every night. I highly recommend you go check out Branson Anderson's music. I'll be back in Winnipeg in December for a handful of shows. The LC3 will be at the Royal George Hotel in Transcona on Sunday, December 3rd for Country Sunday, 4 to 8 p.m. The LC3 is at the Times Change High and Lonesome Club on Thursday, December 1st for our very first Lost Country Christmas special. And I'll have the 4-piece alternate version of Lost Country with me on New Year's Eve at the John Osborne ANAF number 1, ringing in the new year at our local neighborhood Legion. Surely a great place for country music. Folks, I'll take a quick moment here to thank you all for streaming and sharing, supporting, listening to my new record Lost Country, which came out on October 27th. We celebrated the release with a beautiful evening of country music at our very own Times Changed High and Lonesome Club back home in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Our friend Amy Nelson and her group from Calgary were in to open the show, and they did a great set. Folks, I'm super excited to finally have Paul Weber here, joining me on the podcast for a chat about his time with Joe Firth and the Promised Land, into his own great career and life in country music. Long history between Paul and his brother Mike and their family and my late father, and it was great to sit down and talk about those old times and Paul's great career. Folks, thanks for tuning in. I hope you'll enjoy my chat today with Paul Weber. Paul Weber recorded for Boot Records, Cardinal, and the Great North American Phonodisc Company. He's a 3-time CCMA Award Nominee and a Juno nominee who landed a dozen singles on Canadian hit charts. He was a member of Joe Firth and the Promised Land from 1975 to 1981 before branching out on his own to lead his very own group, Paul Weber and Top Hand, touring extensively across Canada and into the UK. He released his debut standout record, 2 Bits Worth of Hurtin', in 1981 on Boot Records. Whiskey Tears followed in 1983 and Older and Wiser in 1991. In 1992, country star Gene Watson released a version of Paul's song She's No Lady. Paul left the hard life of the road in 1996 when he purchased the Commercial Tavern in Maryhill, Ontario, determined to build a first-class establishment providing entertainment true to the authentic style of country music, which he has performed throughout his life. In recent years, Paul has been performing semi-regularly, and he's still in Maryhill, but now with the Commercial Tavern up for sale. He played his trusty 60-plus-year-old Fender Jazz Bass on 8 of the 10 cuts on my new record Lost Country, and he was kind enough to join me for a duet on Me and the Old Promised Land, the signature song from his former boss, friend and mentor, the late Joe Firth. Friends, it is a travesty that Paul Weber has not yet been named to the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame. And I'll admit, it took me way too long to reach out to Paul and finally secure some time to sit down and have a chat for the show. I'm so glad that we did, and I hope you'll enjoy it, folks. Here it is. It's my chat with a beautiful country music singer and a good man, Paul Weber, on the Northern Report.
It's kind of a bummer for me, man. I never got a chance to do this with a couple people that I had really planned on doing it with, Denny Eddy and Joe Firth. And I know that Joe plays Joe's played such a huge part of your story and your early career, and I'm hoping that maybe in a little while here today you can help tell me and describe to anyone listening here about Joe and about what it was like to play with him. But before we get through to all of that, where did it all start for you? Where did you guys grow up?
Well, we were born in Kitchener, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
We lived kind of on the outskirts of Kitchener, so we were always kind of in the country. And then as times changed and there was what we call the expressway, a double-lane highway kind of went through Kitchener to speed up the flow of traffic. It didn't come through our property. It became pretty close, and like looking back, not that close at all. I think Dad was just looking for an excuse to get a little more land and get out of the country, get a little further out in the country. So at that point, we moved to Preston, Cambridge, it's called Cambridge now, and that's only 15 to 20 minutes away from where we were raised, or born rather. And I think about at that time already, I was 16, so Mike was already on the road with Joe, my brother Mike, playing steel, and I was still home for a couple of years, and I left it when I was 18. I went on the road, but we all played with a family band. My dad had a band that played weekends. It started out with his brother and himself and another guy on steel, and then my sister Susan got in the band before us, and then Mike gradually. But by the time I was old enough to start playing too much, there wasn't really a lot of room for me unless it was dances and things like that. So I already started my own band when I was about 16. So I was doing that when I got the call, so to speak, that Mike called, and my brother. Am I getting ahead of myself on you, Sean?
No, this is great.
And Mike called me one night. It was funny. It was a Thursday night. They were playing in Guelph, which is only, it's only 15 minutes from where we were living at the time. And that was a six-night gig with a Saturday matinee as well. And he called me, I think, on a Thursday night and said, could you come over? Joe wants to talk. Well, Joe didn't really do the talking. Mike did the talking at that time, and wondered whether or not I'd ever considered going on the road playing music with anybody. And I really hadn't, even though Mike was on the road for a year before me. I was working kind of construction, working with a stonemason and playing weekends. But it was odd, the circumstances, because that night I had tried to get my band together, my weekend band together, to little practice, and I had a steel player and a bass player that neither one of them played real well at the time, and it was them that probably needed the practice, and they were all too busy to do it. So I wasn't in the best mood about that. And then Mike called, so I went over to Guelph, and music store had just repossessed the bass player's amp off the stage and taken it back to Toronto, and he. Mike just said, Joe wants to know if you'll go west, and they were leaving that weekend. And I said, gee, I'd like to think about it a little bit. And Joe was famous for that line where I have to know right now. And it took me many years to learn to say, if you got to know right now, the answer is probably no, but if you'll give me a few days to think about it, perhaps yes. But I was 18 and I didn't know any better, and I just finally said yes. So I had to go home and next day and tell my band that I was done. Quit a job that I really did like, an old stonemason I was working for that, was grooming me to take over the business sort of thing, and tell Mom and Dad that I was going with Mike, and that's how I wound up on the road.
What was the first instrument you played when you were growing up?
I started on a 4-string, a tenor banjo that Dad had. Just started strumming on that, and then like in a mandolin, obviously the same finger formation, small neck sort of thing, mm-hmm. for a 4 or 5 year old kid, and oddly enough, that too is kind of an interesting story that Mike wound up with that banjo when Dad died, and it was an old Vega banjo that was really, really good quality and expensive banjo, but it was a 4-string banjo that not everybody would want. And when he heard that my wife, Donna, that I wanted to get a left-handed banjo built for, a left-handed 5-string, he called and he offered that banjo if it would work. And we have some friends around the area that Bill Noon is a guy that builds and repairs guitars and plays, a good bluegrass player. And we took the banjo to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, this will work great." So he built the left-handed. He changed the neck and did everything on it. And another old buddy of ours, an old banjo player named Ronnie Horton, who just passed away not long ago at 90. He did all the TV shows years ago. Great 5-string player. He did the fretwork in the inlay, and together they built this banjo. But it was Dad's original banjo that I had started playing on over 60 years before. So it was kind of interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did it come easy to you? Like, I mean, you guys are obviously all musical and you're playing together and kind of probably learning on the fly, but did playing come easy to you?
Yeah, it really did. And I guess that's just because we started so young.
Right.
I used to, and then I did start playing guitar. Then I don't know, I might have been probably 6 or 7. I'm not sure when I started playing the acoustic. And Dad got me a lead guitar as well, and I dabbled with it. I tried, but I never really did get past the chording stage, and did some runs and stuff, and soon realized that there was, a lot better guitar players around than I was going to be. And I concentrated on the singing. And I used to sit with Mom and Dad's reel-to-reel. Dad had a reel-to-reel tape recorder in those days that Mom would tape the radio all day, the country station, and then she'd write the words out for him. And I used to do that after we were done feeding the horses and the chores were done before I went to bed. I'd sit in their bedroom and write songs out off that reel-to-reel. And I had a memory that was pretty amazing at the time. If I wrote a song out, and if I actually physically wrote it out, I knew it. So I'd learned 6 or 8 songs a sitting and know them. And it's funny, it stayed that way too, because if people would bring me a song that they'd written out and said, "Here's the words," I wouldn't know it unless I actually wrote it out myself. And then from there, I also went to starting to tape myself to try to make my voice better. And I don't know too many 10-year-old kids that do that, but
no kidding.
In this day and age, they would, because they're on computers trying to become stars. But I didn't have that in mind, and I just kind of put that together right now myself. When you asked, if I had, did I plan on doing anything? And I didn't. I guess I just wanted to sing, and I wanted to sing decently. Wow. But I didn't have any, I don't think it was an ego thing. I don't really understand why I started taping it at that age, but I did.
But the singing, that was where I wanted to go next, because, I mean, you were a gifted vocalist and a great country music singer. So was that a natural thing for you, the singing?
Yeah.
And then you worked at it as a young kid. And what kind of songs were you learning when you were writing down these 6 or 8 tunes of sitting? Like what kind of stuff was it?
I was learning all the old stuff. Like I knew every Hank Williams song before I was 10 years old.
So that's where you guys would have all found some common footing as young men on the road, in the early days, is like a real genuine appreciation for country music. And that's what was going on at your house and in your life as a kid, was just strictly country music?
Yeah. Oh yeah. In fact, I've never even heard anything else. I went on the road at 18 and with Joe, he set up a band that could, he put us in a lot of rooms that we didn't belong, that we shouldn't have been there for the music that we played. But Joe was a businessman and he was a money man, and anybody could go play the country rooms, but he put us in tuxedos and put us in the rooms that, we couldn't really handle. We only handled them because we worked hard. And then also he'd start he might hire a keyboard player from the rock, with a rock background, or a guitar player, a lead guitar player. And then that would be designed that they were going to do the other stuff. But we too had to learn how to play it. And it was foreign for me. It was, I remember when we learned Hotel California and things like that by the Eagles, and take it to the limit, and Meatloaf, something by Meatloaf that was, I'd never even heard of him. We ate a lot of Meatloaf, but I never heard of him as a singer. So this was really tough for me. And it was tough as a bass player, and it was tough to get the feel for it. And I even quit the band over some of that stuff for an hour or so when I couldn't hit that. I had to sing the highest harmonies, and I actually hurt my voice doing it for a while. I did develop what they call the primary larynx cancer that I was operated on it already at about 22, 23 years old. But and so we played everything. But before that, I had no roots in anything. But never heard of the Beatles.
Wow, I was going to say even the Beatles.
No, and it's interesting that I have developed an appreciation for a lot of that stuff. I once heard my brother say, they always make the joke, there's only two kinds of music, country and Western. But Mike didn't make a joke. Mike once said, there's really only two kinds of music, and that's good and bad.
Yeah.
And he's right about that. Like, we might not, appreciate everything to listen to it every night of the week or for hours and hours. But I can appreciate anything that's good, and that you can tell that the guys had honed their craft and really worked at what they were doing. And there was a purpose to it. There was it was heading somewhere, the song was. So, I developed a liking and a love for a lot of different music after that.
Were you a bass player already when you got the gig with Joe, or was that like you can have the gig, but you got to play bass situation?
Yeah, no, I wasn't a bass player, but I was within about a day and a half.
It seems like everyone was, Al Hooper, when I interviewed him, he said, well, everyone in the band played a little bit of bass in those days.
Yeah, no, Mike taught me what I needed to know, and that was a little different for the first few nights. But when you were playing 6 and 7 nights a week, and sometimes down east, you'd have a 7-night job with 2 matinees, so
no
9
way.
shows a week. Yeah, we were doing Monday to Sunday with a Saturday-Sunday matinee.
Holy shit. I mean, this is a thing that all the veterans I speak to talk about, is like just the sheer amount of hours that you would get on stage being in a band in those days. It's like, if you were even, minimally talented, you could really hone that and become a real serviceable musician.
You just said it. You said exactly what I was going to say. Mm-hmm. And, we had an opportunity that now wasn't, a few years ago we said, oh, you'll never see those days. Well, now we know you'll never see those days again.
Right.
And we used to get weekend bands. We'd come always out on a Monday night, wherever you were playing, whether it be out west or wherever. And those would be bands wanted to check out what the band was like, the road musicians were like. And they didn't come in with a bad attitude that, oh, look at these guys taking our job. We met some really, really nice guys and some great players too. And, I was in Calgary or something, I think, one night, and we got to know one of the bands real well. And Mike could take these guys, the steel players, they'd wake him up at 9 o'clock in the morning. We'd been to bed for an hour and a half, and we'd drag their steel in, and Mike could show them this and show them that. And Joe would say, Mike, they're stealing all your licks. Don't show them nothing. Mike say, you know what? They might have just stumbled on something I don't know. They're like, and steel players are a different lot. They're a good bunch because it's a tough instrument, so they have to be a different sort of person. But anyway, these guys would say, these band leaders would say, well, man, we can't do what you guys do. Like, our intros aren't tight, or nothing's right about what we're doing compared to what you're doing. And I just, one night, the first time I ever said it, I said, you know what? If you drove spikes 2 days a week, and I drove spikes 6 days a week, and our equipment was similar, who should become the better spike driver?
Oh, yeah.
It should be me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, that minimal amount of talent. You don't have to be a phenom, you don't have to be special to get good at something if you put the hours in. And we had that advantage. And that's why so many of the old players, and that's why I even learned to like the old rock bands, and I was bringing some of them in when the bar was still open. I'd have a classic rock night, and people found that odd, but I got more out of that classic rock bands than I get out of what they call country music nowadays, because those guys learned to play.
Right.
They could play.
Yeah.
Because they had the hours. And I feel bad that the kids nowadays, I said this years ago already, the kids nowadays have to cut their teeth on karaoke machines and on computers, and because there's no place just to go out and just learn how to sing on stage.
Yeah, you got to really want it. Like, you really got to chase it down, and you got to want it, and you got to be able to do more than one thing,
Yeah, exactly, yeah. No, we had the best of it. We had the best 40-year kind of a layout, maybe 50, but kind of a window that Larry Mercy and myself, every time we've been together for years, we've said that, that we had the best of it. And that's the only reason we could make a living. I'm not including him on that list, but I will say myself, that's why I was fortunate enough to make a living in country music. And then later, by the bar, and I've had 27 years here too. So, that's a blessing to be able to do that. And you know what? The other blessing is that you're out there still doing it.
Well, thank you.
Because you know what? That deal when we did the album, when you asked us to play on the album, you didn't need me. You're twice the bass player I am. You're one fine singer, you guys, and you're connected to all them great players. It was a pleasure to be part of it.
Well, thank
you. We'd done a little bit at your dad's memorial there. We played a bit that day, but I didn't appreciate what your talent and your love. And see, that's 3/4 of it too. You can have the talent, but if you don't care, talent doesn't mean nothing. You got to love it. You got to care, and because even with a minimal talent, you'll get heart and you'll get feel, and you'll learn to get around it too. And anyway, and I know what you're doing now with Corbin stuff, and like it's amazing. It really is. And I give you credit because you see, I might have quit a little sooner than what a lot of guys might have. When I bought the bar and got off the road in '96, I had a lot of people say, well, what are you doing? You're just still at the heart of it. But I decided that, I was going to quit the road. I could see the road changing, and I could see those 6 and 7 nighters turn into 3 and 4. And I knew that you didn't want to be 3,000 miles from home with a 5-piece band and have to get rooms for them 3 or 4 nights of the week.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, man.
And you can't look after anybody proper because you're not keeping them busy. And it's, so I just decided to quit the road before it quit me. And it would have. And it broke my dad's heart when I got off the road. It really did. Because he lived out his music that wasn't available in his day through me and Mike. And I know that. He never ever voiced it, but he played weekends and he played steady weekends. But when you had 5 kids, you didn't go on the road playing music. There was no road in the first place.
Yeah.
So I know it was kind of rough on my dad when I left the road.
But you had spent like 20, like what year did you join Joe's band?
I was 18. It was in 74.
So over 20 years of being on the road, like basically, every week of the year for the most part.
22 years I was on the road. And we took 2 weeks off a year.
With Joe or your own band?
Yeah, with Joe and my own.
Okay.
We took the week of Christmas off, and we took the first week in June off. I used to do a fly-in fishing trip, and like it was just designed that that's the 2 weeks. If you want time off, that's what you got off. And, it was interesting because, you'd put an ad in the Toronto Sun or Star or whatever, and, 20 bass player or 20 players or what you want would audition. And you'd say, we work steady. They'd say, we want to work steady. We want to work steady. Well, they all want to work steady until you give them a little shot of working steady. And it just wasn't for everybody. It really wasn't.
Not every band was operating like that. Like even the other people that would have had a bigger name in Canada in those days, like they weren't doing 50 weeks a year, were they? Like, or was that kind of common?
They weren't, and they were probably smart because in so many ways we lost opportunity. I was invited many times to do the Tommy Hunter show. And I'd say no because I was at West, and then the one time that I finally did get the invitation again, Boxcar Willie was sick and couldn't make it up from the States, and I was in Edmonton, but they offered to fly me home, so I flew home just for that day to do that show, or else I would be sitting here saying I never got to do that show because I was too busy, and you see that guys like Terry Sumption, he never left Ontario.
Right.
Very seldom. I mean, he did the Big Valley Craven thing a time or two, but so CFGM in Toronto, which was the biggest station in Canada at the time, he was always in the loop with those guys, and he was always playing Southern Ontario. And because of that, he got more opportunity and more ink, so to speak, as far as, to build a career. Whereas we were often saying no. And, same as I didn't work the Yukon, and I didn't work up in the Northwest Territories because they wanted 2-3 weeks at a time if you went up there, and we didn't have it to give it to them. So there was some disadvantages to working that steady, but you're right. The big stars didn't work those kind of deals. We wound up working rooms that, I remember when Joe came to me and said, you can't work Swift Current and Moose Jaw no more and places like that. And I said, what do you mean I can't work them? He said, well, doesn't look good for your profile, your career. And, you're working for less money than what we're getting in Calgary and places like that in Edmonton. And I said, well, then I guess we take less money at them big jobs, because I said, I want to work 50 weeks a year. Mm-hmm. And he didn't like it, but, and I understood his point. You can't work for $2,000 in Moose Jaw and then think that if you go up the road 7 or 8 hours or wherever, that you should get twice that. So that's what we did. I took less money at certain places, and, and you do the same.
Right.
I know you do. There's good jobs and there's bad jobs, but there's not 50 weeks a year of good jobs.
But tell me about Joe Firth in 1974 and what he meant to you, and he must have been an intimidating figure, and your brother had already been in the band for a while and toured all over. So what was that like, and what was Joe like? And maybe talk about sort of the you've talked about the travel, but the demands from him as a band leader and as the guy driving the ship.
Joe was a walking contradiction. Joe was an interesting cat. Looking back on Joe after 49 years and seeing Joe die and stuff like that, it changes your perspective on a lot of things. You understand more. But at the time, as a kid, and, I had a bit of a rough and tumble way about me as well. And we butted heads a little bit that way because Joe was around her, and but Joe ran a band right even when I started with him, where he didn't do a lot of the communication with the band. Mike did it all. So if Joe wanted to tell you something, or if he wanted to you didn't often get credit, you had to wait for that, but if he wanted to make a complaint about something, it came through the band later, through Mike, which was even more interesting because he was my brother.
Right.
So they treated me pretty tough, but they had to, and I knew that at the time already, that he couldn't give me any preferential treatment just because I was his brother. So it was tough. It was not the music part, mm-hmm. but the discipline part. The fact that there was a whole lot involved. I once got in Toronto, playing in Toronto. I got a $25 fine 3 times in one night for being late going on stage.
No way. He would fine you guys.
3 times in one night.
$25.
I was late getting there. Yeah. And then I was outside with some friends 2 other times when they went on stage. And he fined me $75. I wasn't making $75 a night.
And they're probably making $200 a week or something like that.
I was making $160 a week.
No way. Six nighters, $160 a week, 74.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that would have been like factory worker job money in those days, probably.
Oh, it was good money. It was good money. But the Joe thing, to me, Joe was the best businessman I've ever seen in my life. He knew how to make money. He knew how to promote. He knew how to book, keep a band working. Mm-hmm. He knew how to sing too, but he wasn't often in the now or in the present.
Right.
He was always, on stage singing. He was always booking a tour somewhere else. The music was never at the forefront for him. But it didn't matter because it gave us lots of opportunity again to play. But if if you could make a complaint about Joe, that'd be it. Joe, and he was would readily admit that. One time we were playing in Lethbridge, Alberta, and we met the guy that owned the tack shop in town. There was I forget the name of it. I should know all them Western, it was one of them franchise Western store places. And so we got to be friends with him. And one night on a Wednesday or Thursday night, he said, guys, come on over. I'll give you everybody a nice Western straw hat, and we'll play some tunes and have some drinks. So we all went over, but Joe wasn't going with Joe said, I'm like, oh, they're play for nothing. Why would I? So we played till 11 o'clock in the morning. Like this, it was 11 o'clock when we were done playing. He gave us all a hat. And just as we were leaving, his wife had made us breakfast. Just as we were leaving, Joe comes stumbling in. And the guy said to him, Rolly said to him, Joe, would you sing me a song? Joe said, I don't think so. He said, I'll give you a hat. Joe sang Coca-Cola Cowboy, which was Mel Tillis' song at the time. Mm-hmm. You're just Coca-Cola. It was this guy's favorite song. He sang that song for him, and he got the same hat that we got for singing to him for 6 hours. And that day, he told the guy, he said, you know what? Paul Weber lives to sing. I sing to live.
Right. There you go.
And that was his attitude.
Yeah. Business. And he found a way to make money doing playing music and booking bands. That was a big part of his life too, as well, right? Was being an agent. Yeah.
Yeah. North American talent agent. He opened the West. Like there's guys that might argue that, but he opened the West for the touring bands. He didn't open the West for the stars to fly out to Edmonton and play or Vancouver or something, but he did open the West for us guys to jump in a vehicle and drive out West and play.
How did he do that?
Just by doing it.
Like he went out there, someone booked him, and he went. What I heard is an agent booked him on a tour out west, and he again had the charm and conviction to convince the club owners that he should book himself, and then he began, carving out a circuit. Is that kind of accurate?
That's accurate. That's exactly right.
So he had already carved that out prior to you joining the band.
Only by one tour, I think.
Oh, so you were there, or like he was just playing Ontario prior to that?
Yeah, that's right. I think that with Gordon Audie, with his brother, Gord Henry and Audie Henry, mm-hmm. I think that they'd done one West tour. And I might be wrong about that. I might have been on the very first West tour. But either way, they'd been down east already. But Joe just, he just, and see, when I left his band, I didn't really leave on that good terms. Your dad had just started in the band. Mm-hmm. I only got about 2 weeks of your dad. Because my album, I had done an album in 1980, and it was coming out in 81. And Joe went to Mike and said, this ain't going to work with him and his band, with his own career. And Mike said, well, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, I don't know. So we were heading west. They were heading west in February. And I wasn't going to I couldn't go if I was going to mention my album to any of the DJs out there or any of my friends. The album was coming out in a month, and I wasn't supposed to talk about it.
Okay.
And I just was I finally said, you know what, Joe? I didn't say it to Joe because Joe didn't communicate that way. I said to Mike, I'm not going. If that's the case.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then when Joe found that out, he said, well, tell him I'll give him $25 a week more. He can finish the tour. They hired a young guy named Gary Hislop, Gary was from that area Joe was from. Mm-hmm. And I was supposed to teach him to play bass and for that tour, and then come home, I'd be finished. And I didn't get my nose out of joint. I just said, something. I got an album coming out, and there's nothing wrong with me telling people about it. So I didn't go. And so that's why I only got the 2 weeks with your dad. which was very, very sad because I would have loved to play more with him.
Well, I've heard that story a little bit too. That he was sort of trying out for the band and went up to Sudbury on the bus, and he told me that there was obvious tension between you and Joe because you were still uncertain as to whether you were going out west for a few months with them, and but he also said that you were the only guy in the band that would talk to him that week.
Oh, he was a good guy.
He said it was like just very sort of old school Joe, the head bully of the schoolyard kind of thing, and very intimidating even at that point in time,
Yeah, and he was. And, you asked about that, and I guess maybe that's why, I don't know, maybe whether we acquired a certain respect for each other, but I never really backed down from Joe, even as an 18-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I didn't care how many guys he'd knocked out for no reason. And I wanted, at that point, I just wanted to play music.
Right. Yeah.
At that point. Because although I never wanted to get on the road, once I got on the road, I decided I wanted to stay on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so Joe and me, we got a better relationship as far as the talking went later on. But Joe was always Joe. And that's why he was successful. Even my brother, Mike's a good businessman. He probably learned some of that from Joe. And I often tell people that Mike thinks with his head and I think with my heart.
Mm.
And that's why I run this bar, and still own this bar. And the days were changing where it wasn't making money anymore at times, but I still wanted to bring the bands in. I still want to do a good job and give a good product out. And, because it was about pride and it was about what was right and what was wrong,
Yeah. You're in the band with Joe for 6 years on the road, steady as the bass player and probably, singing a lot. And so how does this come about that you end up recording 2 bits worth of hurtin' and connecting with Boot Records? Just before you go on that one is, were you content to just put your record out and continue playing bass for Joe Firth, or did you see some sort of change happening?
That's interesting. That's a real good question. I never even thought about. I guess I never looked that far ahead.
Okay.
It was Dallas Harms. I knew Dallas. We weren't close friends, but we backed him up, and I knew his reputation. And I had a couple in Calgary offered to pay for an album for me. I'd written 2 bits worth of hurt, and I'd written Under the Influence While Getting Over You. And I'd sang them at a party with them at a rodeo, a horse show, I think. And Milton Jen Service was their names, and I think they're both gone now, but they said, we want to pay for an album for you. And I said, well, I didn't know what to say to that. I said, well, I don't know if I want to do an album. They said, well, we'll pay for it. I said, well, I don't know if I'll ever be able to pay you back.
Yeah.
We don't care. Whatever happens, happens. So that's how that came about. And then I talked to Dallas, and I said, I'd like to do an album. I got some money, and I got some songs, and he was living in Ancaster, so it was only about not even an hour drive from Cambridge, 45 minutes. So I went down there I think it was probably about this time of year, probably October, November. And we went down his basement, and he had a little studio set up there, just real tape recorder, but everything for the time was up, high-end stuff. And he said, well, grab that guitar there and sing a song for me. And he put the tape recorder on. And I think I sang Rose-Colored Glasses. And he sing me one more. So do a faster tune, so I did. And then he backed the tape up, and he turned it on these big speakers and real good quality except my voice. And he played it back, and he went, hear that? Do you hear that there? Do you hear that there? And he pointed out everything that was wrong. And he just took the wind. Like I said, I don't think I ever had a lot of ego. I hope I didn't, but I hope I never came off that way to people either. But I was a pretty confident singer.
Yeah.
And by then I really thought I was a confident singer.
Sure.
I didn't say competent. I said like confident. I never had a problem with that,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he pointed all this stuff out to me and said, man, that's just bad. That's just plain bad right there. And he said, and like even your guitar playing, like he said, I know you won't be playing on the record, but that all affects, the groove and where you're singing and your time and like he didn't hold back at all. And I was floored. I was devastated. And we talked a while after that yet, and then he walked me out to my truck, and it was snowing a little bit. It must have been November. It was snowing a little bit, and it was gray outside, and I was grayer inside. And I put my hand on it as well, Dallas. I said, thanks for at least listening to me, and thank you for giving me such beautiful advice and everything. and I said, so you know what? I said, nothing ventured, nothing gained. We tried. And he still had my hand. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, obviously we're not going to do this. He said, are you kidding? He said, I can't wait to get you in the studio. He says, you're an animal. I said, I'm a what? He said, all I wanted to see is make sure that the stuff I heard about your temperament, I wanted to make sure I could work with you.
Wow, nice move. Veteran
and
producer.
He said, you passed all them tests. Because he said, if you were a guy that was going to punch me in the mouth for telling you what I thought, you would have done it down in my basement.
Yeah. Wow.
And
well, you had some respect for him already at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? And I couldn't argue with him because, he did point some stuff out that was bad,
Yeah.
And then, but later, then he told me, he said, man, you've spent the last 5.5, 6 years singing harmony that wasn't in your range, singing in rooms that with no monitors, you couldn't hear yourself, over crowds and fights all around, getting off stage and fighting yourself. He said, so obviously, if I turn a tape recorder on, you might not be a finished product yet, but you will be when I'm done with you. So we just worked, and I give Dallas a lot of credit for anything that happened to me, any success I had.
And did he find the deal with Boot Records to put your record out?
Yes. Yeah, he didn't. Like Joe tried to say that he did, but he didn't. Joe was on Boot too, and that caused some problems too with Joe. And Joe didn't think it was right that they put me on there without consulting him, and it was a kind of a goofy time.
It's so old school, like the way that he wanted to kind of control the side players' lives.
You had no idea how he controlled the side players. We got West to Medicine Hat playing the Westlander motor in, and it was brand new. And we played in the lounge. I think I can call that right. Yeah, we played in the lounge with Joe. I mean, my first week out there with Joe and Mike. We played there from 9 till 12. And then from 12 till 2 or 3, or probably 11 till 2, the cabaret was downstairs, and Ronnie Hawkins was there. So that's my first. I never even knew who Ronnie Hawkins was when I got there. So it didn't take me long to figure it out. Yeah. Anyway, we'd go downstairs, and Hawkins would get us. He had a 9-piece band, like it was amazing, and he'd get us up. At the end of the last set, we'd get up, and I sang with him every night. And Mike, he'd say to Mike, well, bring your steel down, man. And Mike never did. And it wasn't until well after the fact that I found out that Joe told me he wasn't allowed to.
Yeah, there was some real protective shit with Mike. Didn't he not want Mike to play with anyone else?
That's right, because he was afraid he'd lose, And, right. And don't get me wrong, like Joe got me to Europe. After we got through the problems of me leaving the band, he called me within about, 5-6 weeks. And I had started putting a band together, and I got a few little jobs. Niagara Falls, not too much going on yet. It was the case where you got to lie to somebody. You either got to tell the band that you got no work, or you got to tell the owner that you got no band. So I chose to let on like I had a band, and I got my jobs, and I put a band around that. But
right.
To get going. But he called in and asked me if I wanted him to book me out west. So that at that point, then we were back together, but it was dollars and cents, and I understood that.
Yeah, well, yeah. So like I said, my dad had kind of hipped me to that whole thing, and so you guys have this sort of tumultuous relationship for 6 years, touring and traveling and working together, and it's right up to the end of that week in Sudbury, right, where till Joe finds out that you're not coming out west, and then they have to go on without you. It's like right down to the wire, right?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't. See, Sudbury was the week before. Then we came back to Caledon, a little place by Orangeville. And that's where, on the Friday night, so we're leaving on Saturday, that's where on the Friday night that we finally come to the final blows that I'm not going. And, so that's the way that went down, yeah. Yeah, our relationship was a good way to describe our relationship, me and Joe,
Yeah, and then you kind of go and regroup, and then are you planning on, okay, I'm Paul Weber. I'm going to go tackle this 2 bits worth of hurting, put the band together, get some jobs. Joe calls you up and then sends you on the road for probably 12 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, I think it might even been 15.
Holy shit, man. That is a wild way to go.
And you know what? There again, that's how stupid I was. Like I'm kind of duncy right now too because of some head injuries. It's starting to come back on me, but I was really dumb as a young person too, because even when I got my band, left Joel and got my band, I hadn't thought it so far ahead as to where I was going to play. I mean, I was getting jobs around home, but I knew that, you had to get out there and go. So I hadn't yet thought about going west when he called me and offered to send me west and east and Europe and all that stuff. So, I guess talking about Joe, if I don't have a day to talk to somebody, it comes off like not really knowing where I stand with Joe Firth or where I stood. But Joe did me a pile of good. I'll give him that. But, I lost certain clubs. Like I lost Cook County Saloon when Joe was booking me. And Barry Sparrow and myself, we got along good. And we played there on a Halloween weekend, obviously years and years ago. And me and the band and Barry, the staff, we all partied together, and we drove up to Hinton. And I was up in Hinton, and I got a call from Joe. He said, "What happened with you guys?" I said, "What do you mean?" "You and Barry." I said, "I don't know what happened." "Well, he don't want you back." I said, "Well, we broke his bar record Friday and Saturday night."
Yeah.
And we drank together till noon, and he doesn't want me back. And you know what? I was proud, and I was young, and I was, it didn't take a lot to get me mad. And I just said, "Well, that's fine." Joe says, but they want you at this kind of a dive compared to that. They want you at this other place. I can't think of the name. Doesn't matter.
Beverly Crest.
Beverly Crest. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I said, "Well, you know what? If you don't want me, we'll go."
Yeah.
So it was that. And it took me years to find out that Joe had phoned Barry and said, "Do you want Paul back?" He said, "Well, certainly I want Paul back." He said, "Well, I got 3 other acts you got to take or you don't get Paul."
Oh, man.
And I didn't like it, obviously, once I heard it, but then it started making sense. And see, Barry was upset too when Joe said that I didn't. Joe told him that Paul doesn't really want to come there anyway.
Just playing everyone.
And we were both too busy and too proud to call each other and say what's going on.
Right, yeah.
So that was Joe's game. And I didn't have a real good name out west with some of the bands, because if they called me Joe's pet project, that if I lost a week somewhere, Joe would just bump another band out, and it's wrong. Looking back on it, it's all so wrong. Guys that were depending on that week too in the rooms, and Joe just, sent them home or do whatever, and kept me working. So, I understood why some bands didn't think much of me at the time. So,
yeah, that's again, man. That's like some old school stuff, and just gaming everyone around. And he was booking bands until near the end,
Well, I know, and you know what? All this stuff I'm saying to you right now, by the end, I'd vocalize this to Joe or whatever the word may be. I'd told him that I didn't appreciate it, and
right.
But by then he was an old man, and and maybe remorseful himself. I don't know. It was hard to tell with Joe. That's why I initially called him a walking contradiction. I think he meant well. Joe would buy you a $150 touring jacket, with your name and his name on it, and he'd give it to you. But he'd beat you for a hamburger next time on the road somewhere,
right, yeah.
And it's not for a hamburger or something like.
So
I'm sure it was tough being Joe, even for Joe.
Yeah, he sounds like it. So when you do leave, and now you're embarking on this solo path, and you get sent out west into the trenches, like, you had a lot of experience, sure, but did you have any idea what you were doing as a band leader, and were you still playing bass and fronting the band at that point?
I was, till I bust my hand. Okay. And like that would depend whether I was on bass or on acoustic, which hand it was and how bad it was. So I probably was for the first tour on bass. And I think the first time I added bass, it wasn't because I bust my hand. It was just because it was thought that we needed a bigger band. We needed a fuller sound and this and that. So that was kind of a funny deal too. I was playing Moose Jaw, going to Saskatoon, and decided I'm going to get a bass player. Mm-hmm. And Grant Carson, do you remember Grant Carson?
Yeah, yes. Actually, I got a couple of his tunes that I really, really liked.
Yeah, Grant, you want to talk old school, man. This guy treated his bands great. Like, he treated his players good. Anyway, Grant was playing at the Barquet in Saskatoon when we were heading to the Barquet. So we got there, they were doing a Sunday kind of a benefit something. And when I got there, Grant come up to me and slow talker and just says, I hear you need a bass player. And I said, yeah, well, I wouldn't mind getting one. He said, you take mine. I said, I what? He said, well, I got them. He had a brother combination too of a bass and steel players. He said, he'll come and play for you. I said, well, geez, this isn't like trading hockey players into a. I said, what are you going to do? He said, I can play bass, and we can go back down 4-piece. We don't need 5 bodies. He said, you're at the beginning of a career. I'm at the end. He said, you take them. And I so why can't I think of Dave, not Crothers, Dave. I'll probably get it later. But anyway, they were from Fredericton, New Brunswick, them 2 boys, and been on the road just as me and Mike went, just blind, and went with Grant. And he left Grant that day and started with me and was with me for 4.5 years after that.
No way. And 4.5 years, like, I can't like overstate this. Like, the amount of shows and nights you play in 4 years in those days together is insane.
Yeah, you know what? Like, that's why when people talk about being on the road for a couple of years or something, that's nothing if you're just playing the odd week.
Yeah.
But when you played 50 weeks of them years, you got to know guys pretty quick. And but that was kind of guy that some of them old guys were. Old Grant also, we were playing with at the Brooks Cattle Country Jam and Dick and the Dick Dameron Festival or whatever they called it. And Asleep at the Wheel was on the show as well, and a whole bunch of players. But it rained really bad the night before. Asleep at the Wheel pulled in with their Silver Eagle, and they got stuck we were in the middle of a 1,000-acre cattle ranch type thing, and the stage was out there. And so me and Mike started help carrying the big Martin system, all this through the mud, and Greg takes me aside, slapped me on the side of the head and said, you're not carrying nothing. That's why we got no star system in this country, because assholes like you are out there carrying equipment for these guys.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
But anyway, that's the way all that went down. And you know what? Like I say, having said it, Joe was who he was, and me and Mike wouldn't have got where we got either without Joe. So,
were you comfortable, and did you feel competent as a band leader running a show at that point?
I felt good about running the show. It took me a little while to learn how to run people, to run a band. I had a father-in-law at the time who was a friend of Joe's that was a big wheel on Teskey Ready Mix in Toronto in the 60s when they built all the first high rises. So he had like 200-300 men under him driving cement truck. And when I first met him, and I was leaving Joe's band, he said to me, there's a trick to working with men. And he said, some guys need a pat on the back. Some guys need a kick in the ass. Some guys don't need anything at all. He said, your problem, your thing that you have to work on is figuring out what's what and who's what. Because there's so much truth to that.
Yeah, personalities.
You can't treat everybody the same.
Yeah, it's true.
You got to figure it all out. So it worked all right, but it was touchy. And the other part of it being touchy was I was used to being a sideman, and I didn't find sideman to be a derogative term the way some people meant it. And we weren't even allowed, with Joe, we weren't even allowed to talk to an owner or a manager. If he came to talk to us, we had to walk away.
No way.
Joe wouldn't let us talk to these guys.
Full control of the.
And you're sure not going to go out to his place to have a meal, even if you're invited, unless I'm going.
Wow.
So all of a sudden now, I can talk to these guys because it's a lot of the same clubs out west that almost all that I played.
Sure.
And I can talk to them, but they're almost strangers to me. And yeah, it was tough in a sense. And I too, then I'd still kind of party and associate with the band. And I soon found out why Joe didn't, because you become, I don't know how to describe it, but you can't be one of them when you're trying to run them.
Yeah, the lines get blurred pretty easily when you're traveling with people and when, there's expectations from them. And yeah, I could see that. I mean, his approach seems a bit extreme. Yeah,
it is. But you know what? Sometimes we were dealing with extreme guys too.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So
and
some of them I didn't have a problem, but the odd one would take advantage of that fact. Yeah. So for me, that was kind of tough, but you soon learn. And it was funny too, because I had a little Bose system. My Bose had just come out. So I had, started with 1-802 aside, them little Bose speakers.
Yeah.
Like not the little ones like you get on the radio, but you know what I mean by the music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. Anyway, then I got two. So now I got two on each side down stands, and then the bass pins came up, the 502s. So that looks a little better, and I had a box kind of separating them, so it looked like a stack of Martins, but it wasn't. And I'd get in a place like the Cook County Saloon or the Ranchman's in Calgary or something, and sound-wise, we could compete, but once they knew what it was coming out of, they didn't believe it was real, and we didn't have off-stage sound. At that time, the bands were coming from Vancouver and stuff like that, and like Midnight Rodeo Band, different good bands. And a lot of times it was rock bands that had disbanded and 5 new country bands formed because it was the urban cowboy era, and there was money to be made in country music.
Yeah.
So, we could hardly compete with that, and that was tough. But that's when we started working hard, and that's when, I didn't hardly say 2 words between a song in those days. I didn't. We just banged the tunes off, kept them dancing, and kept them drinking, and didn't give the owner a chance to think about how good we were, or how big our PA system was. And we worked hard, man.
Yeah, it's hard to explain to younger musicians now what that was like. Like, you guys would drive on Saturday night from wherever your gig was, however long the drive took Sunday, and then you would set up not just your gear, but like full lights and full PA, and sometimes rooms were bigger, and and then you'd play for 6 nights, and then it wasn't uncommon for late nights and excessive behaviors and yeah, and it's just seems so daunting, like to I just hope that people understand what was involved in that. It's a tough life that you were able to make a living playing country music, but it comes at a huge cost.
Yeah, exactly. And as well as everything you said we were doing, we were also rehearsing from about 8 o'clock in the morning till noon, or 11, till the bars opened again.
Really?
So a lot of times you were rehearsing before you'd gone to bed.
stay up all night jamming and drinking, and then go run through some stuff.
And you had to rehearse.
Well, yeah.
And I mean, you had to rehearse, and you know this. You had to rehearse 3-4 times a week, because if you cut it back to 2, it showed. It's a challenge. You know, I used to tell musicians that answered the ads or came out and wanted a job, and I'd point up at my sign that said Paul Weber in top hand, and I'd say, you know what? You don't have to love Paul Weber, but you better love top hand. And this better be the single most important thing in your life, or don't waste my time or this band's time and get in that truck. And I'm almost even ashamed that I put it to guys that way. Looking back.
But I mean, that's how it was put to you, right?
Yeah, that's what we learned. We didn't get time off to go to weddings. We didn't go to anything. Me and Mike, I used to worry that if my mom or dad died while we were on the road, Joe wouldn't let us go to the funeral. Like, that's not right, you know? It's not right.
Yeah. My dad was on stage in Saskatoon with your brother when I was born in Kitchener.
Yeah.
Yeah, you weren't going home. You weren't going home for that stuff. And no, that isn't right. And that's
it's just completely wrong. And
were all the bands like that though? Like the way that my dad and the way that your brother have described the Promised Land band to me was like very, very, like I said, like schoolyard. It was like we were a band, we were a crew, and like no one else is allowed in, and there's a competitive nature to this. Like, was everyone like that?
Yeah. No, I don't think they all were. And I know they weren't all, or Grant Carson would have never gave a player that way to me. He wouldn't have given me his bass player like that. Joe took everything to the extreme. And unfortunately, you're right. He taught us to do the same because we didn't know any different.
But, you know, you spend now like from 81-ish till 96, you said, on the road steady. And then you kind of, you 74. Come back home. So yeah. 81 as a solo artist now. So that's 15 hard years. You've already done 5.5, 6, and then you kind of come back home and you buy the Commercial Tavern in beautiful little town called Maryhill, Ontario. Can you tell me what the circumstances around that and getting off the road and buying the bar, and then what your live performance schedule began to look like from there?
Yeah, that I thought I had to see what it was going to be like, and it worked out pretty much the way I thought. I never planned on playing it as much as I did because I've seen too many other guys that got their own bars that overplayed, and I saw what it did to them. But at the same time, when music changed, I couldn't find the bands to play the kind of stuff we were playing. So I'd bring in Johnny Burke, and I'd bring in Harold McIntyre. I'd bring in different good fiddle players, different guys to sit in with us. But overall, my house band was pretty consistent. By the end, I probably had found 3 or 4 bands playing the kind of stuff we wanted. And then then I wouldn't be on stage. But I played it a whole lot in those, we've been shut for 3.5 years now. So in those 24 years, I played it way more than I ever intended, but I was the guy that would work for nothing, and I was the guy that could keep it rolling, and we could bring in acts around us. So It was good. It was really good.
But what made you want to do that in the first place? Like buy the bar? Were you just trying to sort of get some roots and stay home, or what was the plan?
Yeah, like I said, I knew that the road was changing, and if I wanted to keep playing. And I did want to get home. I was remarried, and I hadn't had my son yet, but that was a plan, to be around home more and carry on. And Dallas had a saying too, that if you could use the first half of your life to set up the last half of your life, you're a pretty fortunate man. So, and I did that here. So, but it was tough. I'd open at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I'd work the bar till 8 o'clock at night. Then I'd go and change, put my hat on, put my cowboy suit on, walk on stage. And you were never shutting down, because even when you were behind the bar, you were entertaining these guys. It was fun. It was fun. They were all characters, and it got pretty tough. But I didn't know any better, because I could keep going. and I always had. So, one time when my oldest boy was only about, I don't know, 12 or 13, somebody asked him how many hours I put into the bar. Asked me. And I said, I was too busy. I said, I put lots in, and I walked away. And he sat down with a pencil and paper, and he figured out I was putting 110 hours a week at that point.
Yeah, man, that's your whole life when you're running a place like that. And it's not a small building.
It was a big thing. And, everybody thought, well, you got it made, but if something breaks down, if a urinal plugs up, or you're under the floor, or if a cooler quits, or fights, and it was. Looking back, sometimes it's hard to wonder how you did it. It's hard to believe you did it.
So, did you continue to go out west after you bought the bar every now and then, or were you were established? You were at home. You were not going on the road anymore.
Never went west. Never. I went out for the Ponoka Stampede just as a holiday, because my buddy Jim that lives here now in the building, he rents an apartment. That's where we had met again after many years of not seeing each other, was at the Ponoka Stampede. So he took me and my wife Dawn out, and about 6 years ago, and it was nice to get out there. But no, I never, and I kind of retired. I was gonna quit. I wasn't going out anymore either. I was just playing in here, and then Doug Dietrich, a good friend of ours, like family steel player buddy. He puts on these barn dance shows. It used to be a traveling barn dance that Dad was on when he was 8 or 9 years old, my dad. And so they started recreating these shows with with an announcer, and real old-timey, and it's nice with a house band. It's real nice. So Doug brought me back, and I started doing more of them again. But it was hard to get out of here. I could have got a call with a great job on a Saturday night, and I just wouldn't go do it because I'd set this place up that it couldn't run without me.
Right.
And even if it was just in my own head that it couldn't run without me, I couldn't leave it. I couldn't leave it. I had to either do it or didn't do it. And so I didn't go out a lot. I went out on Sundays and stuff, but I didn't do anything through other than that. But it was great. Sean, it was... you basically bought yourself a job that you could make a living with, and you could still play as much music as you wanted to. And I could play with whoever I wanted. And, I'd bring in the good brothers, and, they'd come in here and play for me for a fraction of what they were worth on a Sunday afternoon, just because they wanted to help us keep the room going. And, I had so many of the players did that for us. You did that for us. And it's amazing. It's just, so the room, it's sad when it's uncertain where you're going to wind up and that you got to sell something you love, but the room did its part, and it was quite a ride. It really was.
I bet, man. You've had a great run, and you've done some great stuff. Before I cut you loose, I did want to ask you about a few songs. You mentioned Under the Influence and 2 Bits Worth of Hurt, and those I love those tunes. I think they're great songs. And the rest of that record, there's like 6 Dolly Parton songs on that album. Can you tell me how that happened?
When I told you that I went to Dallas's and we got this thing booked that we're going to do this, he checked with all the publishing companies. In those days, you just check with the publishing companies in Nashville, and they'd send stuff to you. So they sent it through Boot Records, and we got piles of tapes and got looking through stuff and listening through stuff and narrowed it down to the songs that you see there that were there. And but they're all demoed by male vocalists. So it wasn't until the jacket came out for the album that I found out that Dolly Parton wrote 6 of them. And it was amazing. She even sent me a letter.
Oh, wow.
Handwritten letter thanking me for cutting her songs.
Oh, that's really nice, man.
Now, I had a wife burn that on me, but I deserved it.
2 more tunes. One of them is on a Joe Firth record. Great song, and you are singing your ass off and dragging that ball and chain. You wrote that song?
I wrote that, yeah.
That's a great one. So how did that happen that you ended up doing that duet with Joe?
Well, Joe asked me if I would go to Nashville and do a duet, because we also did It Looks Like It's About to Hit the Fan.
Yeah, same record. Bottle of Tears, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that whole story, that whole session in Nashville was just an experience. Anyway, he said, if you want to write a song for that, why don't you do that? And I sat down. That's what I wrote.
Damn.
Dragging Our Bone Chain. And yeah, we went to Nashville, and so I was only singing on the duets. And that's a funny thing too, because you get to Nashville and Joe didn't have all the tunes picked out yet. Like most of us would go to Nashville, we'd know what we're going to do, but Joe didn't go that far yet. And we get picked up by Joe Allen. Joe Allen wrote a lot of Gene Watson's first hits, like Should I Come Home, Should I Go Crazy, stuff like that. But Joe Allen was also a guitar player. And they met us at the airport. Or no, we took a rental car over and went to his place. And it's a log cabin out in Hendersonville on the outskirts of Nashville. Big bass pond in back, and there's all musicians there, like singers, songwriters. And they've sent somebody out to get a couple of bottles of cheap wine because they're all broke. They're all big writers, but checks only come in, every 3-4 months, whenever they come. And they're all living in their big mansions, but they're broke.
Yeah.
So Joe's typical Joe. He doesn't want to have any fun. He just wants to find these songs and let's get back to the room. And they said, just take your time. We'll be all right. You just sit down and relax. So they started passing around guitars and singing and Bottle of Tears. They sang that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a new album called Whiskey Tears at the time being released.
Mm-hmm.
So Bottle of Tears, 4 of these guys wrote that song. And just like, they didn't write it while we were there, but they sang it as if they did. Like they sang it in that sense. One guy went Tricks. And he said, man, I played some good ones in my time.
Uh-huh.
And then the next guy said, in games, I played them with the best of minds. And, battled my way to the top, and I bottled my way to the bottom. I mean, I sat there, but the hair was standing up on my arms and back of my neck. It was a killer song.
Yeah, it is.
So we go in the studio, we do the duets, and I'm done now at this point. So I'm sitting with a big, tall can of Budweiser in the control room, and Joe's going to sing Bottle of Tears with the band. And Joe couldn't care less about Bottle of Tears. He's just doing an album. And one of the guys from Nitty Gritty Dirt Band was sitting there with us. He'd been in the studio all day, and he said, he says, get in there and sing that song. He can't sing that song. I said, he can sing that song. I said, it's his record, first of all. I'm not going to be singing it. So I finally went on and I said, Joe, I said, sing this song. You can sing this song. This is a good song, and this might be your last time in Nashville singing, man. Give it a try and forget about everything else. And then he sang it. And if you listen to that, I think it's the best he's ever sang. And it was, his problem was it was just about money. It was not about anything but.
Well,
so that was quite an eye opener in Nashville that day.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I listened to that this morning and I thought to myself, this is as good as I've heard Joe Firth sing on record ever. Like that's a good performance. Like it really is, and it is a great song.
Yeah. I describe that song for anybody that ever listens to it. And some people think they don't understand how I mean this, but that's the kind of song that makes you think that you're sitting in the middle of a room with no clothes on trying to cover up, and everybody that you've ever done anything wrong with in your whole life is standing around you and they're saying, look at you now.
Mm-hmm. Because
that song is as strong a song as you'll ever find. And you know what? He did get it. And that was important. Yeah.
One more tune, and Gene Watson cut this one. She's No Lady, and that's on Whiskey Tears, right? Tell me about that song and how it found its way to Gene Watson.
I was playing in the Pump in Regina with my band, and I was playing bass at the time, actually. And the Pump had a stage that was kind of built out, not in the middle of the room, but in the middle of a long wall. And the people sat real close to the stage, which I really kind of did like. I always liked that. But there was a whole pile of young girls sitting right off to the one side of the stage. And so they'd been, flirting with the band, carrying on all night. The guys had been buying them drinks. And they were, carrying on all night. And places were packed in those days every night of the week. And when the night ended, I grabbed my bass, my old bass, and I kind of put it over my shoulder, and I'm walking past these girls and heading outside. There's a little strip motel outside where we stayed. And as I'm walking by, the one says, "You got your girlfriend, you're taking her to bed, are you?" With my bass. And I said, "Well, she's no lady, but I sure do love her." And I got back to my room and I thought,
yes,
she's no lady, but I sure do love her. And that's one of them classic things. And as a songwriter, that song wrote itself in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, the best ones can happen fast, eh?
The only difference was when I went to cut it and played it for Dallas. Dallas went, "Ooh, wow. It's good, but man," see, I didn't establish the hook as the lady being a guitar until the last line of the song originally. So, you're talking about all the things. She's been set on everybody's knees. She's been dropped around. She's been passed around at parties. But I didn't establish this whole guitar, that it's a guitar I'm talking about, not a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And Dallas said, "Man," he said, "it's risky doing it the way you're doing it." He said, "Radio stations will hear that and they'll just think, no, we can't play that." So he asked me to rewrite that part. So that the chorus, as I established the hook earlier, and I just made it known that it was a guitar I was talking about. So that's the way that went down. And then I had a top 10. I had a number 9 single with that. And then a guy in Australia cut it. And it wasn't Keith Urban, I wish it had. But he's some brothers there, and you might even know the name because you got some pretty obscure records, but I can't think of it. But they cut it. And then, Johnny Burke and Harold cut it at some point. And the Lonesome River Band, a bluegrass band in the States, they've cut it.
That's great.
But before that, Gene Watson cut it. And it was Dallas had got it to him because Dallas had a lot of track, I had 5 or 6 number 1s with him, Paper Rosie and Cowboys Don't Get Lucky, all them songs. So he got it to Watson. And Watson did a great job of it. But Watson, when he released it on that album, then he was in some legal battles about label, and he got changed to a different label. And because of legalities, that album only got released in Canada, not in the States.
I didn't know that.
It did get put on, and I don't know why. I never understood why. It did get put on one of his greatest hits albums, and it wasn't a hit. But it is on one of Gene Watson's greatest hits albums.
That's great. I mean,
it's weird that it wound up there, but that's how that came about. And then it got placed with George Strait. Gary Buck, I don't know if you've ever heard of Gary Buck.
Yes.
But Gary Buck is a guy that got Paper Rosie to Gene Watson for Dallas originally. He's the one who pitched that song in Nashville. He was a Canadian guy, a guy from home here. So he came in here one night, and I didn't know he was dying of cancer at the time. He had 2 weeks to live. He come in here, smoked a big cigar, and I was just about ready to close. Just me and him sat for about an hour and a half. He had a drink, and we had a drink together, and he didn't even tell me he was dying of cancer, but he said to me, "Guess what I did?" I said, "What'd you do?" He said, "I got your song to George Strait." I said, "Which song?" He said, "She's No Lady." I said, "Really?" He said, "He's got her on hold."
Damn.
And you know what that means? Like the American artists, they used to get a song like that, they'd put it in on hold, and then they might cut a demo of it, they might live with it for a while, and when it's on hold, no other major act would release it. Like of that caliber of guys, it was mutual respect type thing. So it was on hold for a long time, and then it never got cut. And at that time, I started noticing that Bubba Strait, which is George Strait's son, started getting writer credits with all them big 4 or 5 top writers in Nashville, like Dean Dillon and guys like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether he started suddenly writing or maybe George just set him up a little bit or whatever.
Oh, yeah, come on.
So I said at that point to everybody, I said, that song will never get cut by George Strait because, now they're looking after the boy or the boy's writing. Maybe he's legitimately writing, but it never did get cut by him. But it's been a good song for me. I wrote that just for the musicians, really. I didn't think anybody else would understand it, but it's been a good song.
Man, thanks so much, Paul. Thank you for giving me some of your time here today. It's great to chat with you, and I hope that I'll see you out there. I'll send you a note, but we're going to be out there in March, and I hope that I can see you guys there.
Yeah, I'd love to see you. And Sean, once again, man, my hat's off to you. I give you so much credit that you were out doing something that's tougher now probably than it was even in the day when we were doing it, and you're doing it right. You're doing it with the heart and the love of the country music and music in general, and with more talent than I ever dreamt to have. And I give you credit, man.
Thanks, man. That really means a lot coming from you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All the best, my friend.
Take care, Paul.
You too.
Well, friends, I hope that you enjoyed my chat today with Paul Weber. Thanks to Mr. Weber for joining me on the podcast. Follow along with the Northern Report Spotify playlist. I desperately need to go tune that shit up right away. I'll do that today in the van. Short drive. Remember to subscribe, like, follow, share, tell a friend, tell an enemy, tell your cousin. Leave a rating for the Northern Report. It goes a long way for the podcast, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Our logo was created by Boots Graham. Music on the program, courtesy of Sean Burns and Lost Country, The Divorcees, and Skinny Dick. From local legends to regional stars to the cream of the Canadian crop, you're going to find it all right here on the Northern Report podcast. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Have a great week. Hey, what do you got for me?
I might have told you this before. My dad's library finds are cited as a material factor contributing to my parents' divorce.